All right, hello, welcome to this video. Thank you so much for tuning in and sharing in this now moment with myself and with one another. Excuse me. I feel like that movie Dumb and Dumber right now where I might have just swallowed a bug. Welcome to Wacky Wednesday. Do you guys ever get those little gnats in your plants and then you have to take all the plants outside and hose them all down? And I've had to do that several times. I seem to have a gnat factory growing in one of my plants and I can't figure out how to get rid of them. Anyways, so now the bug and I are one. Poor little guy. So having said that, it is Wacky Wednesday, you guys. I just am reveling in these energies. I want to talk a little bit about the highs and lows of not ascension, but the highs and lows of the frequencies that are coming in. So not everybody's feeling the frequencies, or better spoken, not everybody recognizes or acknowledges that they are experiencing or feeling the frequencies. From what I'm seeing, most likely, most people are feeling them. They just don't necessarily know that they are, or they may not be aware of them. There are going to be those that are not feeling the frequencies because they are not in their bodies or because they are completely shut down and separate from their ability to tap into their physical form, their heart, whatever it may be. So this is not about those individuals. Many of us, and there's a group of beings who aren't sure what's going on. Sometimes they're feeling agitated. So we understand as a group, boy, let me pause this for a moment. Good, maybe I didn't swallow him. He's floating around here somewhere. As a group, within a group, within a group, within a group, what I've shown, I've got so many messages coming in. We're busting through this glass. Earlier months ago, I referred to it as a glass coffin, and we're expanding, right? Like Snow White, right? Also, we're breaking through these barriers, and it's like we're expanding our bubbles, and we're essentially encapsulating all the other bubbles within, and then we're dissolving a lot all at once. That was the vision that I was shown. So I was shown this vision literally of expanding out, expanding out, expanding out like a balloon, and visualize a plasma bubble getting very, very big. And so let's say we have this belief, we have this limiting belief, we have trauma that we haven't necessarily acknowledged, or that we thought we worked through, but there's more layers that could still be valuable for us to uncover, unlayer. So then we expand out because we're having this wonderful assistance from the Schumann resonance in the earth, from the activations from the planets and the suns, from help from our guides. I say our guides, and I always like to share that encompasses our ancestors, future versions of us, the galactics, the angelics, right? On and on and on. So we have this immense expansion. And as we expand out our auric field, for example, or we activate our DNA, or we allow these downloads and influxes to come into us, we expand out. And when we expand out, we then encapsulate all of those other things. So what I was shown is that that's an idea to kind of see as time. So we are doing it faster, and it's bigger chunks of information that we're then able to process, integrate, recognize, remember, acknowledge, download, etc., etc. And so as we do this, we might have 10 ahas in that big bubble because we're taking all those other little bubbles and we're dissolving them, we're popping them, we're acknowledging them. Some of those bubbles that we are essentially encapsulating by expanding out and bringing ourselves into this greater field of awareness aren't necessarily all sunshine and rainbows. So if you visualize that for yourself personally, what could that represent, right? So it might represent childhood trauma. It might represent relationship disagreements and communication issues. It might be physical things that we haven't dealt with. It might be past life memories or traumas that we were holding within our cellular memory. It can be things that we haven't forgiven ourselves for, or feelings of shame and lack of self-worth. I could go on. It's really an almost infinite, I think. What does that hold for you that maybe you weren't aware that was unnoticed or unhealed or unacknowledged, right? So we have these massive influxes of energy. And from what I'm being shown, it's coming from everywhere. It's coming up from the earth. It's coming from the sun. I already said all of that. And it's also coming from within us. And the more we're able to go within and connect into and open to what it is that's being offered, the bigger that bubble becomes, and the more bubbles of whatever's in our field are then covered and dissolved. So many of us are having these massive understandings all at once. So this means we're able to access more information, we're able to process more information, we're able to work through traumas from one perspective that much faster. And I keep hearing it's at a quantum speed. This is having a ripple effect. And because so many, I'm being guided to share, just because so many of us have already done so much work, a lot of times it's not as, those other bubbles can dissolve really quickly because we're recognizing and acknowledging them from a different perspective than we may have 5 years ago when we went through this before, right? From one perspective. And then there's the other side to that, the other side of the coin that says, wow, some of this stuff is deeply embedded trauma that is really rocking our world. And the other thing that's coming in a lot is it's deeply embedded beliefs. So one of those bubbles is a belief about how our reality works. And I'm going to maybe do another video just on that, because everything I've written about for the last 2 years says over and over again that we don't know a lot. And so we think we know a lot. And when we think we know a lot and our ego bubble is like this, or everything we built our lives around is this belief, and that gets popped. And then all this junk comes up to show us why that was false, or perhaps why it's no longer supported from another perspective, or perhaps why it was created in the first place, or perhaps the energy that bubble really holds. Or to be more expansive, oh, look, there's another layer, and this is the nugget of really what was going on. Fill that in to anything. Physics, and I know I'm not obviously a physicist, but this is just what's coming through and I'm just sharing. So physics, science, all of that, literally our reality. Mathematics, which includes geometry and all of the equations that many of our scientists have based reality on. So that's one message that I'm getting, one bubble. Our economic reality, our political reality bubble, right? And so that's all of that outside stuff. But also that then affects our inner bubble of who we think we are, who we believed we were. I am, let's say, a teacher, or I am a human, and I come from this ethnicity, and therefore that is who I am. We're starting to see more and more that that might be true from one reality, but once that gets popped and we realize that that's just one aspect of who we really are, and then we start to see that next layer of, well, I am a human and I've evolved from Homo sapiens, right? And I'm not saying that exactly right, because there's different versions of evolution. We have anyways, that's another video, but let's say that's all we believe. And then that bubble is popped because we find out, wait a minute, maybe our DNA was also manipulated or created, not necessarily from source, but I'm just talking about other beings that maybe have played a part in who we are. That could be a reality that blows people away. I'm just using all of these different examples. Because if we're so embedded in these beliefs, when it gets shaken up and it gets exposed as to, well, that might have been true at that time. That science was correct based on 3D, but now we're in 4D. So therefore that science doesn't apply to 4D in the same way. So therefore it wasn't necessarily wrong, but it's no longer correct, or better spoken, it's no longer supported. Therefore there's more, right? So this is kind of what's coming in. And I'm not the only one having these ahas and these realizations and downloads. Scientists are having them. Mathematicians are having them. Doctors are having them, right? We're learning more about the physical body. We're learning more about technology, and it's literally coming in packets, huge packets, because we're able to expand this bubble out and encompass so much more, because many of us have already worked through the stuff that has kept us from opening to this next layer. And I kind of went all over the place there, but that's what happens when these energies come in. So let's go back to the basics. So essentially, when these traumas come up and we remember certain childhood memories, or we recognize, wow, I'm really disappointed because I was really attached to who I thought I was, or who I thought my friend was, or who I thought my spouse was, right? As soon as we start to see things from this other perspective, we're no longer looking at it just this way, we're looking at it this way. Not everybody's at that space. They might be here still, and they might have just had their first little layer of reality exposed in any arena or area of their life, or what they're able to see. So we're really being asked to be patient and have compassion, because just because our bubble is out here doesn't mean everybody else's is, from one perspective. Or it could be that they haven't quite been able to dissolve or process all of these realizations as quickly as some of the others have. It took time for me. This didn't just happen overnight. I've been working on dissolving and integrating for years. Some people are just now being exposed to these high energies from one perspective. That's not the only reason. And then it triggers this deep sense of something's different, and they don't quite know what it is yet. And they're just at that stage. That is not a hierarchy. We're, because we're out here, we're all working in our own way. So part of, pretty sure I did swallow a bug. Anyways, one of the things that we're being invited to notice is, okay, it's so much. So how we process this is different for everyone. Some of us are processing it at lightning speed. Some of us want to slow down and really see things in the layers. We're all in a different, what I'm hearing is ratio. And that's a play on words. So one of the other messages that's been coming through is how our reality is shifting. And again, I am going to do a video on that. We've chosen to speed things up. So if we're choosing to speed things up as a collective force, we're going to start having these downloads, activations, realizations faster, or we have the opportunity to process them faster. And sometimes we don't have to spend as much time on them, so to speak, as we used to, because we're in a different operating system. So sorry, guys. I don't want to stop though, because I'm in this flow and I actually have a limited amount of time. So these operating systems, we're in a different domain. So that means that everything works differently than it used to. Many of us are finding these highs and lows very challenging. So sometimes these highs come in and it's like we're riding this crest of a wave, right? And then all of a sudden the energy drops and we're like, ooh. It's not as much so in that it doesn't feel quite as like that as it did, let's say 6 months ago. I remember when we started going through this, for me personally, it felt like these massive drops, like being on a ride and your stomach drops out from underneath you or the floor drops out from underneath you. Now it's more of what I was shown is we're at, let's say, we're an A student, and then we tend to get these, let's say, a B in our grade. So that's our average, right? We're not as likely now to drop down to a D or a C. So before we were, let's say, at a D level, we'd go up and get an A, and then we drop back down to the D level. And I'm talking about dimensions or frequencies too. So I'm just kind of playing with grades, gradients as an example. I'm comparing grade radiants. Either way, now what's happened is we're stabilizing at that. So this D and C students are now being invited to stay at this higher level. And it can be challenging for us to keep up that pace with all of the energies that are coming in. So this gradient is kind of going, and I don't know if that's even the best choice to use grades, but right, it keeps going up. So the scale of where we used to be at in this heavier energy, we get these big bursts, and literally we feel like we'd be up and then we just get dropped down. What I'm feeling is now when we get these big bursts, if we can process and integrate and really pay attention to what we need in that now moment, we won't experience these huge drops like we have previously, for those of you who feel or understand what it is that I'm talking about. However, and apologies for me keeping clearing my throat, but apparently this bug is giving me a throat upgrade. So having said that, we have these energies coming in, and then we have the opportunity to stabilize as much as possible. It doesn't mean we always have to be high. It doesn't mean we always have to be on or in sunshine and rainbows. But what I'm seeing and feeling is that if we honor our bodies and we recognize that we are integrating, and I always use the word acknowledge, I am feeling such and such. And as I recognize that I'm feeling certain feelings, it helps me to process them a little bit more with ease than when I'm in resistance to acknowledging or recognizing that that's what's going on. I am feeling anxiousness. I am feeling anxiety, and I'm not sure why. Sometimes just recognizing those patterns can help us, rather than try to power through to ignore it, and be in this state. And then all of a sudden we feel like we just went through, I don't know. Anyway, so sorry, I'm seeing all kinds of things, and I'm trying to hone this in a little bit more so it's easier to understand. So what happens is as we go through this process, sometimes we can feel like we're dropped, we've dipped down, and it can feel like a lull, a low. So I'm just going to keep saying, because what's coming in is part of this is mastery. Part of this is mastering the energies, and it's a process sometimes. It doesn't necessarily happen overnight. So it's okay for us to be human and to feel tired, and to recognize that we're feeling tired, so we might need to take a nap. If we don't follow that, what our body is telling us, we then will end up frustrated or angry, right? More anxious because we're tired, because we're not honoring what our body is trying to tell us. Also, what happens is we get these drops of information and these downloads and these upgrades, whatever we want to label them as, packets. And so sometimes it's just kind of sitting there, from what I've seen, waiting to be accessed. But if we're in resistance, like must power through, cannot relax, something's anxious, I'm feeling anxious, but I'm going to ignore it and push it to the side, that then creates another bubble that we then will have to, at some point, integrate. And sometimes the only way that we can do that is by getting sick, getting so tired that we have to just sleep for days, right? So if we can balance it out and kind of master these energies a little bit by recognizing when they're coming in, we won't have so many highs and lows from what I'm being shown. This also means doing the work, which is grounding, heart math, breath work, meditation, Epsom salt baths, going swimming in rivers, lakes, the ocean, petting your animal, your pet, right? And being in those states that help to balance out the lows or the feelings of trauma that we might be integrating, if that makes sense. I hope I was able to explain that a little bit, because I kind of got a little distracted. So essentially what I'm being shown with that as well is that when we do that, we're creating a relationship with these energies. We're creating a communication system. And then what happens is we're communicating with all of this. I'm hearing it's a universal exchange. So it becomes less of resistance. We're then able to flow into the influx. And we're not just like, no, 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 no. Sometimes we can say, you know, I'm just not ready for this right now. I need to take a break. And just by acknowledging that, or rather than saying, I'm not ready, saying, I don't feel like I'm ready right now, but maybe that feeling will change in an hour or two, because it is happening that quickly, if that makes sense. All right. Whew. So how does it feel? Right? I've talked about this a lot before. We can feel very high heart openings, that palpitations, heart palpitations, crown tingles, pressure on the head, etc., etc. I have an old video on ascension symptoms that you guys are more than welcome to check out. I probably should update that, but it's probably still relevant for a lot of people who are just now starting to feel this stuff. And again, there's no competition. There's no you should have already gone through this, or you should have already done the work. Everybody is working at their own pace. I'm hearing the word pacemaker. So it's like the heart opening. Sometimes we have to work through these traumas, work through these letting go of resistance in order to open the heart. And when we open up the heart, it increases the pace, the speed of which we can then process and pull in more information. Because there's a lot of people that ask me, well, how come I'm not hearing messages from my guides? Or why isn't it happening faster? Or how come it's not happening faster out there? Why isn't my family and friends waking up? You know, these are very common questions that I get. And my answer is the same for a lot of reasons, but oftentimes I'm guided to ask another question that's relevant for whoever I'm working with. So it's not the same for everyone. And let me see if I can go into that a little deeper. So for example, I've worked with some beautiful light workers who, some people, it's about control. They don't realize that they're trying to control the outcome of someone else's reality, right? And they have an open heart, right? But we want them to wake up faster for our own. We think sometimes that we want that for selfless reasons, and that can be very true. Like, we want everybody to enjoy life, and we want everybody to feel all these cool things, and we can't understand why they're not yet, or might not at all. And in essence, they may have chosen not to. And sometimes it's about us letting go of the need to control the choice that they've made, which is their sovereignty. And that's just one perspective. From another perspective, they may already have done the work in another lifetime, and they just chose to come here and live life seemingly unaware. From another perspective, like there's many different ways of looking at it. And so I'm using that as an example because I might work with someone and dip into their partner's field and go, well, this doesn't matter for them. This is about you. And it's always about us when it really boils down to it. Because the question sometimes is, well, why do we feel that they aren't aware? Or the question can sometimes be, what is it in us that isn't allowing us to let go of the need to control their reality? And I mean, there's so many different, everybody's in a different position. Obviously, if you have a spouse or a family member, you want them to be in that higher vibration. But us trying to control them, and I'm using control as an example because that's a bubble, right? Control is one of those bubbles that we sometimes have to recognize that is showing up for us. Maybe that's why our partner, friend, family member isn't displaying to us being aware and awake. They're giving us opportunities to let go of the need to control. And then once we let go of that and that bubble dissolves, all of a sudden they might one day go, you know, I saw a ship the other day in the sky and I'm not really sure. Can we talk about that? Oh. I'm using that as an example and I'm getting goosebumps because sometimes it's not about them. Well, always it's about us, but if that makes sense. So letting go of that need to control their outcome and their timing and focusing it back on us allows us to recognize what is it that's creating this resistance, because what that does is us wanting them to raise their vibration and really feeling that space of needing them to do it is lowering our vibration. And then that creates a bubble of a belief that we then have to work through. Work through isn't even the right word. Sometimes just by us acknowledging, wow, I think I'm feeling this because I need to control, or I need to let go of the need to control, boom, gone. And then there's another bubble sometimes. Oh, well, now it's because I'm afraid that if they don't, then we won't ascend together. That's a really big one, guys, that a lot of people are experiencing right now. And again, I could do a whole video on that. But essentially, then what would that bubble be? Letting go of the fear that they aren't on the right track. And I know it's more difficult, especially if you have children. And that isn't something that, and we'll go into maybe a flow on that. I would be happy to do like a channeling on that because I don't have children, but I could see how that would be really, really challenging. It's hard. It's challenging for me if I see family members that are in it, right? Where it's just like, oh, I'm here, not in a judgment or hierarchical order, but from my view. I'm seeing here multidimensionally, and sometimes I'll have someone that I love who isn't. But that could be from what perspective am I viewing at that moment. Even though I have the potential to see all these realms, that doesn't mean that as I'm viewing them, I'm in a higher vibration. I might be in a place of fear in my own reality. When I'm viewing them, I'm projecting that fear and then looking at them like, oh, I hope they wake up, because if they don't, it could be awful for them. So do you see where I'm going with this? Even though I'm maybe expansive in most ways, that might be that one person who triggers me back into fear to show me, hey, guess what? That bubble's still there, to then get rid of it, right? Dissolve it, and then see what's on the inside from that. What does that expose as that opens? Okay, I just wanted to kind of pop on. I know I went a lot longer than I planned. Thank you for your patience on all of my throat clearing. Let me clear my throat. So it's a lot of energies, guys, coming in. I have a tendency to talk faster, to write faster, to think faster, and to move faster when these big energies come in. And then when that energy drops, it's not necessarily a low for me. If I've been triggered into fear or into blame or into judgment or into, and when I say been triggered, allowed myself to be triggered, it's not like that person's fault, right? I then will feel more tired when these energies shift, because it's something that I maybe didn't integrate or process. It's easier to integrate it and process when the energies are higher sometimes. And then we go into that dip and it's like, oh, wow. It's like having that, did I purge it? And then sometimes being tired because we've purged so much can make us feel like I don't want to use the word depressed, but it doesn't feel high. Therefore, sometimes we can misinterpret it as low or depression. But in actuality, it's just us still kind of at tail end of purging, right? Purging, merging, all of that. So I kind of went into 10 different tangents there. So when we drop and we go into that lull, sometimes that's the time to sleep, to really relax and to integrate. And I tend to obviously be slower and to write more poetry and to be more right-brained, even though I'm trying to connect the hemispheres at all times. That's not always how it works for me. So I'm just sharing my own personal adjustments that happen. And I reflect that, right? I reflect it energetically. And I just want to share what's come in for me about that is not to judge ourselves for, well, oh, we need to stay here. Coherence is a wave, right? But it doesn't mean that just because I'm highly energized today, I'm way up here. I'm still feeling somewhat balanced in my field. It just comes across as hi, because I'm tuning into all of what's available. And then when I'm soft and I'm in flow, I'm tuning into that energy. So letting go of the need to judge how it needs to look or how we need to look when we're experiencing this is also important, because that gives us the ability to feel more free and not have to fit into a certain box or category of how it should look or feel. And I've talked about that before. Okay, there's so much more, but I'm going to end on that note. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I haven't read comments in like weeks, so well, it's been about 2 weeks maybe, and I haven't caught up on all of them. Sometimes I miss them, and I'm trying to kind of answer questions in this way. So some of you guys have asked questions, some questions have come up in session and emails, and so I've kind of answered some of those just in this video, and that's why I talked about some of the things that I did. I'm going to still try to continue to do that. I would like to talk more about the downloads that I've gotten about the quantum, and I'll do that in perhaps again this weekend. So in love and light, guys, thank you so much. Namaste.